Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar on unlocking donor-advised funds with DAFPay. DAFPay is the easiest way to accept DAF gifts. My name is Miliha Zekovic, and I am the Product Marketing Manager at CharityEngine. If you are new to us, CharityEngine is a complete fundraising platform and CRM that keeps all your fundraising tools and data in one place, helping you raise more with less hassle. We're thrilled to announce that DAFPay is coming soon to CharityEngine forms. And to help you get ahead of the game, we're joined by Mitch Stein, Head of Strategy at Chariot, the company behind DAFPay. Mitch will share insights on how your nonprofit can use technology to increase DAF giving. But before we dive in, just a couple of housekeeping notes. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat. Mitch will answer them at the end. And this webinar is being recorded, and we will share the recording with you after the show. Now let's get started. Mitch, over to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. And also, folks attending, you don't have to wait just to ask questions. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat too. It's always nice to know who's joining us and where you're joining from. And definitely don't be shy with the questions. That's what we're here for. So please feel free to drop those in, and excited to cover them. As Molly has said, I'm Mitch Stein. I'm the head of strategy here at Chariot. We are the makers of DAFPay, which is the first and only payment option specifically for donor-advised funds, and creating an express payment method just for DAFs. We also lead original research with our DAF fundraising report and created the first ever DAF Day, which was a sector-wide initiative for DAF giving. So we do all things DAFs, is what I spend all day on. And so I'm here to answer any and all questions you have about DAFs and DAF giving. And appreciate you saying hi, Toran and Jay. Nice to see you all here. So today, with our time together, we're going to cover a lot, and it's going to start off for anyone who is a little newer to DAFs or has some unanswered questions. We're going to do an overview of exactly what DAFs are and how they work. Then we're going to share our research and some of the most important findings about DAF donors and DAF donor behavior that's most relevant to fundraisers like yourselves. Then we're going to get into specific strategies that we recommend for organizations that want to get more out of their DAF giving, and how they can be more proactive with those strategies. Then we'll introduce DAFPay, do a quick walkthrough, and show you exactly how the tool works so that you can get excited for it being live on your CharityEngine forms. And then walk through a couple specific action items that you can take away for you and your team. Okay, so first off, starting with the basics, is what exactly is a DAF? I'm sure most of you have probably heard of it, but I'm sure there are some of you that maybe still aren't totally familiar. DAF stands for Donor Advised Fund. It is a charitable account for giving. You can think of it a lot like a 401k for retirement, or an HSA, a health savings account for your healthcare costs, where there's tax advantages, and when you put funds in, you invest them in the market so they grow over time and increase the amount that you have to spend. For DAFs, donors are able to contribute things into the DAF account. That means cash, but it's also things like stock or crypto, or even wild things like we have a DAF provider that told us someone contributed a cruise ship into their DAF account. So all kinds of assets can be donated. The account holder receives the tax deduction immediately for that full amount. The funds grow in that DAF tax-free over time, and they're able to make grants out of it to nonprofits. Importantly, when the money goes into a DAF, it cannot come back out to that account holder for any reason. The only way that it leaves a DAF account is as a donation to a nonprofit. So it's completely restricted in that way. A couple of the key details on DAFs. First is just like different types of DAFs that are out there. There's over 1,150 different DAF providers. So it is definitely not a monolith. There are a lot of different places and types of DAFs that people can have. The largest one in terms of number of DAFs is the community foundations. There's 750 of them around the country that host donor advised fund accounts. Another bucket that is the largest by volume of giving and number of accounts, which are commercial DAFs. And that means DAFs that are affiliated with a financial institution. So those are things like Fidelity Charitable, Schwab Charitable, which is now known as DAF Giving 360, or Vanguard Charitable, and many others. Another category are what we refer to as single issue DAFs. So those are either affiliated with a specific nonprofit entity, like Stanford University has their own DAF program, or the Nature Conservancy. So we typically see that with really large nonprofits that manage their own DAF program, or a DAF provider that is just affiliated with a certain cause area, frequently that's religiously oriented. So the Jewish Communal Fund or the National Christian Foundation. A last bucket to be aware of is there are some new national and independent DAFs that are not affiliated in any of those ways. And they tend to be a bit more tech forward and consumer oriented. Those are things like DAFI or CharityVest, if you've come across them. There are some important restrictions to be aware of as fundraisers in terms of how people can use their DAFs. So you cannot use your DAF to buy anything. That's the biggest overarching rule to keep top of mind. You can't pay for a gala table or tickets to an event or auction items. You can't use your DAF for anything that gives you personal benefit in return. Now, you can donate from your DAF at an event as long as it is in exchange for anything else. Also, other things like if you have memberships that come with significant benefit, like tickets to performances and things that add up to more than an incidental benefit, you can't use your DAF for those. And you also can't make multi-year pledge agreements with your DAF. If you pay down a pledge agreement over time with your DAF, that's okay. It's a little bit of a nuance there, but these are just things to be mindful of. And then the reasons why people use DAFs from a donor perspective, it really streamlines their giving. They make one donation into this fund, and then they make all their gifts out of that. So they have one tax receipt. They've got a portal that tracks all their giving that they can see year over year. It really simplifies things. Also, if anyone has any goals of like, I want to give X to charity each year or support this many organizations, this allows them to really stay accountable to that. And then a huge one is if they're being smart about their contributions to their DAF, there can be tremendous tax savings, which ultimately lets people give more to charity, which is typically the reason that they're opening these accounts in the first place. Now, diving into some research and the most important things we've learned about DAFs, first and foremost is just that we know they have grown extremely dramatically in the last several years. Just thinking about the past 10 years is that the amount of assets sitting in DAFs are up 5x. Now there's over $250 billion that's already been committed and restricted to giving within these accounts. The amount of money that's moving out of these each year has also grown substantially. So now there's about $55 billion donated to nonprofits from DAF accounts in 2023. And the number of people using these accounts, but there's now almost 2 million accounts out there. And typically these accounts are used by more than one person. It's like a couple that's sharing them or a family. So you have millions of people now that are using DAFs, not just the ultra wealthy, which I think is what a lot of people assumed or still think about DAFs, but they're actually much more broadly utilized. And this is exemplified in how the average account size is also moving down steadily over time. Now listen, $140,000 is not a small account, but the trend line is that the average is coming down, and the providers that do disclose medians, like Fidelity Charitable has disclosed, their median is close to $20,000. That means over half of their account users. Now look, that's still a donor with 20K committed to giving that you want given to your organization. But that's not just the ultra wealthy. It's a more everyday, but still very committed and intentional donor. And then the latest data that we're seeing just from 2024, we don't have aggregated totals yet, but individual providers are reporting And we just see substantial growth happening across the board with anyone who's been releasing their data. And then more specifically in the nonprofit setting, that report that I mentioned at the beginning, the DAF fundraising report, is research that Chariot led with our partners at K2D Strategies, where we looked at 5 years of historical giving data for 20 participating nonprofits. Some of them were some of the largest in the country. So it's like Alzheimer's Association, International Rescue Committee, PETA. And what we saw across the 78 million transactions we were analyzing, over $11 billion in revenue, was when we compare DAF revenue to non-DAF revenue, you see this huge dispersion where the median growth in DAF giving was over 200% in that 5-year window, and non-DAF revenue was 1%, so effectively flat. And similarly dramatic differences in number of gifts and number of donors, where the non-DAF gifts and donors are declining slightly for the majority of participants, but seeing drastic growth in the number of DAF gifts and donors. And we also learn a lot about how that donor behavior differs. So what does it mean to have more DAF giving and more DAF donors? Well, DAF donors were shown to have much higher retention, higher loyalty. Their average differential between non-DAF and DAF donors year-over-year retention was 15 points in the study period, and that they also tended to be more consistent, so more likely to give at least 2 times per year to the same nonprofit organization. And probably what's most obvious is that they're more generous. Even when we exclude major gifts over $25,000, the average DAF gift was still 20 times as large as the average non-DAF gift in the study sample set. And the most interesting takeaway from that research, from my perspective at least, is being able to see how using a DAF changes a donor's behavior. So because we were looking at the nonprofit data here, we were able to see, okay, if a donor gave to Susan G. Komen in 2021 with a credit card, but in 2022, they started using their DAF, what changed? How did their support change? And we had over 16,000 instances of this donor conversion happen within the study. And the average change in their support to the same organization, same donor, the only difference is they started using a DAF in the next year, and the average increase was 96%. So effectively doubling the amount they give to the same nonprofit once they're using their DAF. And this just tells us that there are a lot of people in your file that give to you not through a DAF today, who likely have one and just haven't started using it to support your organization. Because we saw in the study that 26% of the DAF donors were doing that conversion just within the study window of those 5 years. So that tells us there's a big opportunity. Everybody wants to know, where can I find more DAF donors? How do I find the people with these accounts? And the best place to start is that you already have them in your current donor file, and you just need to make it easy and obvious for them to use their DAF, which is what we're talking about today with this integration. Another piece of research that I found really useful and I got to be an advisor on was a DAF donor survey, a donor satisfaction study that the Lilly School of Philanthropy conducted with Giving Compass last year. And in an interview with 100 DAF donors, they found some really interesting commonalities across them. The biggest overarching commonality was that almost every single donor said that they do research on a gift before they'll donate to an organization. So these are intentional folks that are trying to make good decisions and find out more info. By the way, the 2 most popular ways they research are asking their friends and family for an endorsement or Googling. So that's a good thing for folks to think about. What happens if someone Googles your organization's name and the word DAF? Are they going to find a page on your website, more information about using your DAF? It's always a good thing to check out. We also find when learning about their motivations that they are very motivated by anything associated with long-term impact. And that makes sense with the structure of a DAF, right? That you are thinking long-term, you're being intentional, and you're giving, and the outcomes of your giving, you want to mirror that approach to your investing with your giving assets. Now, some other interesting stuff we learned about when people don't use their DAF, even if they have one. So the most interesting question I thought in the survey was asking these folks, did you use your DAF for your most recent donation? Not in the past year did you use your DAF, but just on the most recent donation. And 37% of the respondents said no. And the reason why was because of the extra steps required. And of those folks who didn't use their DAF for that gift, 84% of those donations were going to small or local nonprofits. So it tells us a lot about the importance of making it easy and intuitive for folks to use their DAF, especially for organizations that aren't the largest in the country and most top of mind. Okay, so pausing there, I know that's a lot of research, and I'm sure with the CharityEngine team, we'll link to those specific reports if people are interested in digging into that data. But having a better understanding of all those details on donor behavior and these trends in DAF giving, what does that mean for your organization and how you can take action on this? I like to bucket DAF strategy into 4 key pillars. And I lay this out and call it a proactive strategy because I think a lot of people today, and I'm assuming many of you in the audience, you get DAF gifts today. So you might say, well, why do I need a DAF strategy? We just get the gifts and they show up. There's a lot of opportunity to expand that DAF giving and a lot of potential by more proactively engaging with this channel versus being reactive, which is what we've seen most organizations, frankly, do for the past few years as this trend, as DAF giving has grown. These 4 buckets are really in education. How can you make sure your donors are aware of DAFs? How are we reminding folks to use their DAFs whenever it's feasible and viable? How are we stewarding those donors, making sure that's a part of your strategy? And the last piece is how are we making it easy? Starting off with education, I think it is so surprising, despite all the benefits of DAFs to donors, how many folks still don't know what a DAF is or if that makes sense for them to use. And because we know that DAFs are proven to increase giving and increase generosity, it's to your advantage to have more donors that are using it and getting more intentional with their philanthropy and increasing their giving capacity. So I think it's a great opportunity for you to educate your donors, for you to provide value to them, to not just be making an ask, but to say, hey, here's a useful tool. Do you want to learn more about it? You're not a financial advisor. You shouldn't be telling them what to do, but you certainly can be providing resources and starting conversations. And that really elevates you in that donor relationship as a fundraiser. We also do have a new download on Chariot's blog that's just a 1-pager that you can hand to donors on like the key takeaways of what is a DAF, how does it work, why does it help. But I think those key benefits to hit on in those conversations that we have detailed here are you can simplify your philanthropy, really streamline things, increase your capacity by optimizing your taxes, and that it's just easier than ever. Especially since they'll be able to give through DAFPay right on your website and donation form, as we'll show. The second piece is around marketing and communications. And I think the right step here is to just do a bit of an audit with your team and say, what are all of the places that we are doing fundraising asks? It happens in email, it happens in mailers, it happens on your website, it happens at events, obviously in your donation form. Are you asking about DAF giving in all those places? Do you have information on DAF giving in all those places? Obviously having the button right on your forms with CharityEngine is a great way to get that onto your forms, but there's all these other places and moments of interaction that you could be reminding donors that they have those funds available and that they should be using them to support your organization. Because I'm someone that has a DAF. I'm always looking for ways to use it. I would always rather use my DAF than other methods of giving. And we just find the two biggest things that get in the way are they forget about them. They're not aware that they can use them for a specific event. Like they know there are those restrictions where they can't buy a table with their DAF. But when they're at the event, they can certainly make their donation. When you do the call for fund a need, they can make that gift with their DAF. And sometimes people aren't connecting those dots. So reminding and educating people about when and where they can use them is really useful to the donor and obviously to your organization. Another big topic area that's a passion of mine as a big data nerd is how we're tracking the data related to DAF gifts, because that's the key in showing better stewardship to your DAF donors. It's a common area that nonprofits are frankly falling down on, in my opinion, and not their fault. Like the data can be really challenging, but I just hear from so many stories from DAF providers or from DAF donors saying, well, yeah, I supported them and I never heard anything, or I just got a form letter like months later. Again, I know this isn't everyone's fault, like it's very difficult, but there definitely are areas of improvement that everyone can take advantage of. The biggest errors or issues that I've seen, particularly in conducting the research that we've done, is DAF gifts just not codified or categorized correctly within your database, and maybe even just tracked to the DAF provider like Fidelity Charitable, but folks aren't tagging or tracking the individual DAF account holder that recommended it. That's really, really key. And I think that's what leads to a lot of donors getting unthanked or not being thanked. And then that also just makes it tough to analyze. Like if you aren't specifically tagging or tracking DAF gifts, how do you know the impact overall? A lot of folks are just bucketing it in an offline kind of bucket. And so it just made it difficult to do that analysis. Also think attribution is a common hurdle where anything from a DAF just goes to major gifts. But people use their DAFs in all kinds of fundraising settings. And I think to get that broader team buy-in and engagement around DAF strategy, it'll go a long way to track it correctly and tie it to its channel or to the relationship owner, and not just default to major gifts, for example. And the big one is just a legal concern, is that a lot of organizations are sending tax receipts because the gifts aren't tracked separately and as DAF gifts, which do not generate a tax receipt. So that's just a really important one to double check on. We've also laid out here the ideal dream data file for you of what everything would look like for a DAF gift. And I'm sure these slides and everything will be available, so we don't need to study this for too long, but would just highly recommend that you share this with anyone in your team on the database or gift processing or finance side, because we just find there's often, everyone's just not on the same page. If you don't have a playbook and a clear like business rules around coding for these gifts, that's where you can get a lot of different types of entries that create all those hurdles we just walked through. The key things are that hard credit really goes to the provider. Yes, that's to the community foundation, to Fidelity Charitable, etc. But you want to soft credit that individual donor because they are the ones that recommended the gift, and that's who you want to communicate with and build a relationship with. So you need to legally track the hard credit as the DAF provider, but the donor is who you want to be sending that thank you to. You definitely do not need to send a thank you to Fidelity Charitable. They have mountains of paper mail that they get from nonprofits, and frankly, it's not getting opened. So you can just save everyone's time by not sending those. And then a few other things here, like if you get the fund name, you should try to track that as well. Depending on your database, can depend where you record that, including that have a yes no flag that it is a DAF. That'll help with analysis and making sure you're treating it correctly. And then the tags are really important too, to do that extra work to make sure that the right team is kind of being credited with this support. All right. I'm sure people can study this on their own time. This is also all detailed in the DAF fundraising report if you're interested in digging in further. Okay, now we're at the exciting part where we get to talk about the integration specifically with CharityEngine. So this falls under that fourth bucket of the strategy, which is the technology. How are you making it easy? Wanted to show you exactly what, like if you don't have a DAF today, and I recommend all of you get one, to be honest. It's a really good way to understand what your donor goes through to make a gift and help them troubleshoot and just be able to talk about these things from firsthand experience. A lot of the commercial DAF providers, Fidelity, Schwab, they have no minimums. The minimum gift size is $50. So it is relatively easy to start. And then, I use DAFI, and that's one where there's also no minimum, and the minimum gift size is $18. So as long as you plan on making one gift this year, that's $20 or more, it could make sense for you to open one of those accounts, and it's free. But what the donor needs to do, and it varies depending on which DAF provider they use, they're going through the portal, they're taking a lot of extra clicks, they're going between different pages, they're trying to find your organization, looking it up by EIN, maybe going back and having to find the EIN. This is not a streamlined process by any stretch, and can always result in errors, gifts going to the wrong organization, or worse, just friction, and the gifts don't get completed, which is the last thing that we want. That's why Chariot developed DAFPay, which is that express payment option, express checkout choice to give from your DAF in digital giving experiences. So it can sit right by these other payment options. It's just these 3 pages we've shown here. I'll walk through this in a live demo here in a second, but it is really a step change for those donors who are used to going through, spending minutes, going through lots of pages. Now they can complete that gift without ever leaving your donation form and have it be recorded right away. You get their name and email right away, and it's just way more efficient. And mentioned a lot of these benefits, but to your donor, this is easy. It's a way for them to give more confidently. Oftentimes when they give to their portal, they're like, did that go to the right place? Did I give it to the right campaign? Now they know for sure. It's streamlined with the organization. They're not checking back in with you, going back and forth to confirm gifts. And it's also totally secure. Chariot is SOC 2 Type 2 certified. Everything is encrypted. No sensitive details are stored, etc. And for you all, nonprofit, you know about the gifts right away. You get their name and email for each gift that's submitted. You're avoiding those touch points with donors that you don't want. And that these gifts are just substantially larger than you'll see from a credit card. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen here to show you a quick demo. Awesome. Okay, everyone's seeing this. So this is just an example form I'll walk through, but it'll be the same experience once DAFPay is live for CharityEngine, where I am going to click, I'm planning on making a $100 gift to Central Park Conservancy. In this instance, I click DAFPay. Let's say I've got a Schwab DAF, so I select that. I put in my username and password. This is logging me into my DAF Giving 360 account, my Schwab account. The donor does not need to have an account with DAFPay. They don't need to set anything up. It already works. They log in. That amount they put in the donation form for $100, that feeds in here, but we also remind them, hey, you've got $120,000 in your account. And we make it super easy for them to say, you know what, I could actually give a little bit more here once they're reminded of that total. Since these accounts are invested in the market, those totals can move around all the time. And especially for the last few years, have been going up and up. So it's a really powerful anchor. We also automatically pull in their name and email and address if it's available in their DAF account. The donor can go in and edit any of these fields if they like, but the goal is just to make it feel like that Apple Pay, Google Pay, Express checkout, where they click donate, they were able to do that in a few clicks in a few seconds, and they don't need to do anything else. And your organization is going to get notified right away. You'll see it in your campaign pages right away, be able to thank them right away. And for the DAF, this was just entered as a gift as if the donor was logging into their portal and submitting a gift request. They review that request, they approve it, and they send it. Now, the important thing is that when they send that gift to you, it'll come with an ID, a tracking ID in the note field, no matter how it's sent. If it's a CSV file that comes with your Fidelity ACH transfer, if it's that check from Schwab, if it's in PayPal for Vanguard Charitable, you can look in the note field, and that's where you can match up the tracking ID to what's in your dashboard already. So really streamlines that gift processing process. Okay, I just had a couple final thoughts, and then we can open up to questions if that works, Malia. And we covered a few of these things, but these are just 5 things that you can take away and review with your teams right after this session today. Number 1, just double, triple confirm that you have a way to make sure DAF donors are not getting tax receipts. It's good to thank them. You definitely want to thank them and acknowledge their gift, but they got the tax write-off when they contributed to their DAF. The grants out of their DAF are not a tax deductible event. You could go to your website right now and see how long it takes you to find your EIN. If someone's not giving through DAFPay, that's the number 1 piece of information that they're going to want when they're looking up your organization in their portal, because oftentimes your marketing name is pretty different from your legal name at the IRS, or there's other organizations that sound really similar. And so the EIN is the best way. So they're going to be trying to hunt that down. If it's hard to find, they might not finish their gift. Third is obviously DAFPay is going to be available in CharityEngine. If you happen to use a different platform for any other types of fundraising, double check or ask that they have DAFPay as well, just so you can have that unified experience. And then just two fun ones is just, these are great opportunities for planned giving conversations. Anyone with a DAF account is able to name a specific nonprofit as the beneficiary or one of several beneficiaries if they were to pass away. And the other is that DAF gifts are often eligible for employee matching. So even when someone makes their donation out of their DAF instead of their credit card, it can still be submitted for the matching program at their employer. So just always a good thing to double check on. And when it comes to the partnership here with CharityEngine, the great news is that once this is live, it will be automatically on all forms. We recommend that you claim your account with Chariot just so that you can streamline your payout process and see all of the DAF data there in your Chariot dashboard. But that's not required for DAFPay to be live on your form. And then just make sure you're promoting it and engaging your donors in it. Ask folks to test it out. It's a really good moment to communicate and engage with supporters, where you can let them know about this new feature. Hopefully some folks will try it and give, but you're able to make the ask without an ask, if you know what I mean. And then just keep learning. You know, this is a journey for everybody in the space, trying to get on top of DAFs and what they mean for philanthropy. We publish a ton of research and analysis and resources around DAFs and DAF giving. So, you know, connect with us. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I share about DAFs almost every day. So you might get a little sick of DAFs, but you'll get your fill of information. With that, I'm happy to take on some questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mitch. This is very informative. We did have a couple of questions coming through the chat. I'm going to go ahead and read you a couple, or a few rather. There was one question that was related to the foundations and basically DAF account managers. What if they're not listed there? Could you talk a little bit about the network of folks who are on DAFPay?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, there's over 1,150 different DAF providers, so there's a lot out there. We are fully connected with over 300 of them in DAFPay and all of the major ones. We are constantly trying to add and connect more. I would say if there's a specific DAF that you would like to be listed, or you have donors that want to use it in DAFPay, I manage all of those relationships for Chariot, so you can connect them directly with me. or our team, and we're happy. It's very easy for them to get connected and updated in the system. So it's always just best to help make that introduction so that we can get them set up.
Very good. Is the DAFPay a direct deposit to the nonprofit?
No, so DAFPay is just initiating that request in the donor's portal. So however that DAF sends the funds, they still manage that whole process themselves. That would be nice. We'll hopefully get there eventually so that it does just become an instant payment to you. But yeah, I mean, now that everybody kind of handles those payments differently depending on the DAF. So Fidelity sends that EFT, the ACH transfer, and a CSV through email. Vanguard sends through PayPal grants payments. Schwab sends those pesky checks for each individual gift. There's a broad range of how the funds will arrive, but we won't change that.
Very good. And we had another question from Jake. He's asking about the total amount that you get to see that is available in your account as you're making the donation. He's wondering how often is that total amount updated, given that it's kind of volatile with the market.
Yeah, we're just pulling in whatever is available in how they would see it in their portal. Okay. So Jake, I imagine that varies depending on the DAF. Like some of the larger ones, I imagine, is almost real time, feeding in from their market holdings. Other smaller community foundations, I know, only mark those updates like periodically, like monthly. So it just depends.
Very good. We also had a question about the fee for DAFPay.
Yeah, so you can think of DAFPay as similar to like credit card fees, where there's a 2.9% processing fee for Chariot, and that's just billed. We can't net that out of the gift because the whole gift amount has to come to you. So that's just billed after the fact on a success basis. So it's only fees charged when and if you're getting new support through DAFPay.
Very good. We also had a question about who chooses, I think this is just maybe needs a little clarification. So who chooses what nonprofit to make the donation to, the DAF or the actual individual that's contributing? And should a nonprofit try to create some kind of relationship with DAFs to kind of benefit this effort?
Yeah, the structure of a DAF is that the individual is almost always the one that is making gifts and deciding. They're using the DAF instead of their credit card. So this question comes up all the time, and I think it's easy for people trying to make recommendations on DAF strategy to say like how to get more DAF gifts, make relationships with the DAF providers. Okay, but you and 2 million other nonprofits are trying to build relationships with Fidelity Charitable, who does not make referrals to their clients. So it's just, I think by and large that there's way better, like lower hanging fruit for you to get more DAF support to focus on having it in your giving forms, communicating about it with your donors, like all the things we've talked about today. If you do have a relationship with a financial advisor that supports your organization, by all means, like build that relationship. But I just think unless you are, you're all stretched thin. We're all working in the nonprofit space, having to do a lot with a little time. And so I just try to be mindful of that for the vast majority of organizations. Trying to build a relationship with Schwab Charitable is appealing, but it's a little less actionable and typically not as fruitful. I would say if there's a community foundation in your area, that's a great place to try to build a relationship because they also often are doing their own grant making. That's not out of their DAF accounts. That's just out of the community foundation. And I think being on their radar and applying for their other grants, building relationship, because in the instances that a donor does say like, hey, I'm looking to support, the housing crisis locally. What are some good organizations? And they'll know like, oh yeah, we have several grantees that have applied to our grants in this area. That's the smart way about it. I would just say like the whale hunting is a little bit less productive in my opinion.
There's also a question from me. When is this partnership going live? So DAFPay will be available on CharityEngine forums in the coming weeks. I want to say days. We will have an update this Friday. So if you are a CharityEngine client, look out for that communication this Friday. All right, looks like we have a few more trickling in here. Thank you, everybody, for being so engaged. We have a question from Linda. How would a nonprofit know who to thank if it comes from a DAF manager? I can answer from the CharityEngine perspective. In case of CharityEngine, you would see 2 transaction records for every DAF gift that comes through. One would be associated with the DAF institution, DAF manager, and the other would be associated with the individual as a soft credit. So it would be very easy to identify who to thank.
Yeah, and I echo that. And like for general DAF support, you really do want to focus your energy on the donor, the individual account holder, and thanking them. Sometimes it's tough. You might not have full information, or you only have an address. I would try to do a little digging. I would try to like share it with your team. Maybe someone else knows, oh, we were expecting a gift from this person. I was just on a conversation earlier today where they talked about they have a bi-weekly standing meeting where gift processing and frontline fundraisers go through the list of unidentified donors and see if anyone has ideas so they can make sure and thank them. So it's more work, but I promise you it's really important, especially for those larger DAF gifts.
All right, we have a question from Jamie. If an employer matches a gift, do they usually do so when the donor transfers the gift from the portal or when they initially place the money into the DAF account?
Yeah, Jamie, so the example I was describing earlier is an individual making a gift out of their DAF to support your organization and then submitting that donation to their employer match system to be matched. There's a separate instance, and it's actually what we use here at Chariot, and I, as an employee of Chariot, get benefit from this, where we have DAFs as an employee benefit, kind of like a 401k. I automatically contribute $100 every month into my DAF, and that gets matched into my DAF account by my employer every month. So, which is awesome and way more efficient for everybody than needing to go submit individual donations to get matched. Now I just have twice as much giving capacity, and it's invested in the market in real time. So it's also growing from there. So I would love to see more employers move in that direction because it's much better for everyone involved. But the point I was trying to make earlier was if someone has their own DAF just independently and their employer matches, oftentimes they can submit those DAF grants to the employer matching program.
Very good. And we do have another question from Elizabeth. Will DAFPay be able to integrate with other donation processors, for example, Fundraise Up?
We do have several dozen partners. Those are all visible on our integration list on the Chariot website. We want this to be ubiquitous, similar to like PayPal or Apple Pay. Like we want it to be on all donation forms for you. I would just say with Fundraise Up specifically that the more that they hear from their customers that it's a priority, I think the sooner it'll be prioritized. So the best thing to do is just engage your reps there and let them know that this is important.
One more question from Linda. Are there resources to find small community DAFs?
I mean, most community foundations offer a DAF program. So I would just like look up their websites and see if they have information on DAFs, and probably means that they do. And look, I think there's a lot of ways to creatively engage there. You could ask that they speak, you're doing a donor briefing and you love your donors to learn about DAFs. And if they'd be willing to come talk about it or meet with your board. If I'm the community foundation running a DAF program, that's a really interesting opportunity. And then you get to build that relationship. So it's definitely room to get creative there.
And I believe this Linda's question is following up. We have another question from Linda. It's follow up to this question. Would that be something to share with our donors and recommend they work with their employer in setting that up?
Yeah, I mean, again, I just think it makes all the sense in the world. You get way more engagement from employees. It's less work for everybody, better for the nonprofit. The company that we use for our program at Chariot is Daffy at Work. Groundswell is another option, and Morgan Stanley at Work also offers this. So there's a few different options. I'd say that's the best thing to share with them. I also saw someone just ask about the one pager, and I'm going to grab that link too.
Thank you for sharing that, Mitch. And then we have one more question. Would you suggest bringing in DAF manager at a board meeting?
Yeah, I think that is a great thing to do. It's a good board education. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you have probably done that before with planned giving, where you're helping to educate board members or donors on the value of creating a will, designating some beneficiaries, and because you're leading that conversation, this is in the planned giving setting, they're more likely to have you top of mind when they are, when they're deciding who to give to. So I think it's similar with DAFs. If you're helping them understand and learn about the opportunity with DAFs, you're top of mind when they're going into their portal and making those gifts and supporting organizations.
Very good. I think those are all the questions we had for today. Thank you so much, Mitch.
Yeah, of course.
Right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. This webinar is recorded, so we will be sharing the recording with you after concluding today. If you have additional questions, please feel free to reach out to either Mitch or CharityEngine support or myself. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.